This podcast is brought to you by Rebecca Cassells of the Rising Dawn series. Do you like violence? Do you like smut? Are you tired of the stereotypical novels of werewolf romance out there and want something a little bit different? Then pick up Sparked Revolution, Book 1 in the Rising Dawn series by Rebecca Cassells. Available on Amazon, in Kindle and paperback. You too can become a sponsor of Stories, The True and the Fictional by heading on over to buymeacoffee.com/STTATF or follow the link in the show notes. Hello guys and welcome to another episode of Stories, The True and the Fictional. It is another episode, that's right. Another interview, another fantasy author on the podcast, Anthony Kearle. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, I don't think. Wait. Last episode, Ryan, you had a random question you wanted to ask before we started. Is any random questions this time?
The last author had two first names, so okay, I wanted to. Not so much a question as a hindrance.
All right.
Okay.
So we're okay to go on schedule. Yeah.
We are okay to go to schedule. However, at our last interview, in the talking points where we talk about games, we're going to leave that to last.
Okay.
All right. No worries.
Otherwise, we're going to spend the majority of the 2 hours or whatever it is talking about games, and poor Anthony's not going to get a chance to talk about his books until we're all ready to go to bed.
You're all gamed out.
All right. Okay.
I'm operating on 3 hours sleep today too, so forgive me.
Good man. We'll let you off the hook this one time.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, this time, Ryan.
Jamie's the interviewer. I'm the kind of guy who I'm an interviewer as well, but I just say directly what comes into my mind. There's no filter between the mouth and the so yeah, be prepared.
Oh, definitely. I'll do my best to be.
Well, before we get into the icebreakers, mate,
I'm going to start this week.
Yeah, it's all right, but there's one thing we've got to do first because people probably don't know who our guest is. So the question we said his name, but we want to know who he is. Who is Anthony Kearle?
Okay. I am a hardcore iced coffee addict.
Ooh.
I am an esports competitor. And I sometimes plant my forehead into a keyboard and see what pops up on Microsoft Word.
Oh, excellent.
Cool.
When you say esports, are you playing like Fortnite and stuff like that?
I compete in PUBG.
In what, sorry?
PUBG. Yeah.
I got a couple of mates who play that. I used to watch them. One of them's got a Twitch channel finally, and I sit there and watch them play that. So, yeah, that's fair enough, because I was going to say if it was Fortnite, I'm just going to leave now.
No. Definitely not. Never touch that.
Apex, that shit. I'm just going to, like I said, there's no filter. I look, if you like games, hats off to you. I don't. I think that they're a complete and utter waste of money because they're just money-making machines wanting people to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on it. I've got a mate that I used to be friends with who literally started playing Fortnite, I think 4 years ago, and I spoke to him a little while ago, and he'd already spent $20,000. So, yeah.
If it makes you feel better, the only money I've spent on PUBG is buying the game.
Just on microtransactions and all that stuff. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad it's PUBG because I actually enjoy watching that on Twitch. So that's cool.
It's a bit of fun.
We can move on with the interview.
Okay. Well, do you want to take it away this time, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. Because I like to mix it up because our fans I've had thousands and thousands of emails from our fans wanting to do the first question again. So, for the millions and millions watching at home, I will take over from the first question again because they just weren't happy with enthusiasm, Jamie. I'm sorry.
Okay. Also,
by the way, I saw that you've put a plug up for your new book, Hens Night. Any update on finding the Uber driver?
He doesn't appear till book number 3.
Oh, well, look, I'm not going to read book 2. It's plain and simple.
Oh, you probably won't want to.
Jamie wrote this trilogy of it was supposed to be a screenplay, right?
I wrote a trilogy screenplay trilogy.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
He didn't know me. Well, he probably knew me, but not as well as now because we were playing in band. We used to play bands together, not the same band, but we weren't as close. We only got close over the last 10 years. And so when he rewrote the first one, he included a character. I used to be an Uber driver.
Yeah.
So included a character, Ryan, the Uber Eats delivery driver, and our fans have gone fucking nuts for this guy. Seriously, they're just telling me again the millions and millions people, and just because they all have the same name and they all have the same email address as me means nothing. But they just the Uber driver. Seriously, he was only in it for I think a sentence and a half and had one line, and the fans are just not happy with that at all. I've had famous people like Matthew Holmes and people like that not actually happened, but they've just been clamoring for Ryan the Uber driver. Matthew Holmes even wants to possibly get Ryan the Uber driver in one of his new movies. The other, I have this running joke where I just want him to put me in every book as an Uber driver with one line.
Yeah,
but I didn't make the cut, fortunately.
No, but Ryan, you may not realize that you were pinnacle to a lot of that. It's like, you may have only been in it for like a half a page or something, but without you, the whole thing would have fallen apart.
I know. I'm quite aware of that.
And clearly you're not satisfied with that.
I'm not, because what I want, and just give you a little bit of background with me about, and this is just a quick, I mentioned all the time, but I lost my leg about a year ago, my left leg. So I want Jamie to make the zombies rip my left leg off. So that is, so I can have a bit of a laugh about that.
That'd be a bit of fun.
But, yeah, why not?
Book three.
I'm a happy-go-lucky kind of guy, so why not? Make fun of me, I don't care. All right, so the first question, if you could, now this one I like to say, you can give the political answer, and then you can give your real answer, like what you actually would do. So if you could get rid of one thing in this world, what would it be?
The one thing in this world that I would get rid of would probably be the overinflated price of coffee.
Oh, okay.
That's very specific.
Well, you got to do what you got to do, right?
The prices of this, which is basically liquid cold coffee as well, please. I don't drink coffee, but I drink some of this sometimes.
Well, we're going to knock off all the price, don't we?
No, well, I know a guy that my dad works for who's like makes his own coffee beans and all that stuff, and he's saying it costs them 40 cents to make coffee.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap on that end. And then
40 cents. Yeah.
Well, my best friend that I live with, Stephanie, she drinks coffee and she will go for the cheapest, even like the, Coles or Woolies brand coffee.
Instant.
It's still like almost $7 or $8. And then with the Nescafe stuff, you're looking at $12, $13, $14. It's a joke.
Yep.
Pretty pricey, expensive trade. Nearly need to sell a kidney, I reckon, to get a coffee these days.
Yeah. Well, that's it, and especially seeing as you're a gamer and you're an esports gamer, so you spend a hell of a lot of time gaming in your free time. You either live off coffee or you live off this stuff, and I reckon you'd be spending more on coffee than you would be on your whole gaming systems.
Oh, absolutely. By this point, you're not wrong.
Can I ask what part of Australia you're from, Anthony?
Just outside of Melbourne.
Oh, okay, cool. Because I know some places in Australia don't have Woolies; they have Safeways. So is that?
Oh yeah, Woolies all down here. Safeway's a thing of the past, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. If not unless you go back in time 50 years, and that means go to New Zealand, which I love New Zealand. Got lots of relatives over there. They still have Safeway over there. So there you go.
Oh wow! So, I've only seen one probably in the last 10 or 15 years. Can't remember where it was, but I reckon I've only seen one.
The Melbourne is starting to come up to the future. The Victoria's starting to come up.
Apparently, so they tell me.
Cool.
Awesome. Very good answer. I happily support that for sure.
All right. Number 2, what's something on your bucket list?
That would definitely be to travel through Europe, specifically Italy, I would say. I've got a deep sort of love for that country. I've never been yet, but it's the place in the world that I most want to go to. Sort of one of the main things that got me into reading was historical fiction, specifically the Eagles of the Empire series by Simon Scarrow.
All right, yeah.
And I've watched a lot of ancient Rome stuff, and I'm just addicted to it, to be completely honest. So I'd absolutely love to travel through Italy and just see all the old sites and see sort of where it all started, I guess.
I would never have guessed that from the look of your covers of your books at all.
Never at all. Never at all.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'm just sorry if it looked like I was on my phone. I was just transferring money to buy your books. So at least it's for a good cause.
I'll let you off then.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay, question number 3. Now, this is the one that is very near and dear to my heart. Now, again, this is a like a 2-part thing. You can give us your opinion on what the greatest is, and then if that's not your favorite, you can also let us know what your favorite is. So, what in your opinion is the greatest sitcom of all time?
See, that's tough for me because I don't actually watch sitcoms.
Okay.
I've seen a couple of episodes of different ones here and there, like a couple of Brooklyn Nine-Nine or Friends or whatever. I've seen a couple, but none enough to really, have a huge opinion on. But I guess going by popularity, you'd probably have to say Friends or something like that, purely based on popularity.
What sort of shows do you watch?
I'm very much into realistic stuff, whether it's fiction or whatever. I'm pretty hardcore into stuff. You're looking at your Game of Thrones, you're looking at Shogun, Spartacus, bits and pieces like that. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think we can substitute that in. Both great shows. I just started watching Shogun. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm really enjoying that.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And also Spartacus, I've watched all of.
Oh, the OG.
Haven't watched Rome yet, but my housemate has, so she
Rome's
raves
really
about
good.
That.
I wish it got more than 2 seasons, but I think my favorite series of all time is probably Black Sails, though.
Oh, Black Sails.
Yeah. I absolutely love that.
Well, I think we can accept that as a valid substitute.
Close enough to a sitcom.
Yes. Awesome. All right, Jamie, question?
Now for the most popular question we have, I believe.
Well, I better read it then.
A lot of people out there are dying to know, Anthony. What is your zombie apocalypse plan?
All right, for those dying to know, literally,
Sounds like
probably for me, I'd be more looking at some sort of medieval style castle with walls that obviously, how's a zombie going to get over that? On some sort of remote or an island somewhere with a tiny small population. So honestly, anything like Malta, for example, has a few castles on that, and you just take up residence in there, have enough sort of space to grow your own stuff, and just see how long you last there. Pretty much, become self-sufficient. Got walls, got the ocean to stop them from getting in. Should be pretty well set, I would say.
It's got a good tunnel system there too, doesn't it? Like the catacombs and
yeah, exactly. So there's no shortage of places to move around, to hide, to grow stuff. Yeah. So that's sort of where I'd be leaning towards.
But what can I ask if, like, say you're where you are now in Victoria? What happens if the outbreak hits and some sort of, I don't know, we've got some sort of idiot he's like got a rebel army or something, decides to detonate an EMP or something, and you can't get there. What's your alternate plan?
Tasmania.
Even worse. You'd probably somewhere remote in the mountains somewhere, to be honest. Try and just get away from any large populated areas and figure it out from there. Just
go and visit James.
It's a long.
I don't know if we're allowed to say where he lives because all the fans will just go up and just barge down his door.
Because my town is so small, statistically speaking, they could just knock on every door. Might take them a few weeks, but then they'd find me.
Find you there.
You can go hang out with Jamie in Cabramatta.
Cabramatta, no, I'm Blue Mountains.
Oh, nice.
Sort of. I mean, it's the same mountain range, but everyone refers to Blue Mountains as like this section where it's all tourist, and they ignore the fact that it's a mountain range.
Oh yeah. Beautiful.
All right, well, we'll jump into the last of the icebreaker questions and we'll get stuck into this interview. Now, this one is a favourite of mine as well. Elon Musk has given you a call and offers you to test drive his new electric time machine. Now, what this does is you can go one place and you've got a little watch on your arm that you can push a button and it'll bring you back to exactly where you left from. So what do you do and where do you go?
I reckon I probably go to the 1700s
Okay.
For sort of like the age of discovery, for lack of a better term, because just going around on the ships, then exploring all the new places that you might not have even heard of, finding new bits and pieces, I reckon that'll be really interesting, to be honest.
Okay. I was expecting you to say like ancient Rome or something.
I mean, yeah, but that would be probably
That
my number two. But
might
I
be
just,
risky though.
yeah,
You
that's
know?
it. I mean, it's all pretty risky. I mean, without modern medicine, it's all pretty risky. But
Yeah.
I just the
Yeah.
idea of like discovering all this new sort of new
Yeah.
lands, new countries, new nations, and bits and pieces, and I think that really appeals to me.
You'd be a god though, because you'd have pre-knowledge. You'd be
Yeah,
like,
I
"This
know.
is
I'm
where we
like,
go."
this is where all the good
Yeah,
like land and all that is. We'll just go there.
yeah,
All the minerals, the resources.
yeah. No,
Nice.
that's
Nice.
good.
Oh, that's a very, very, very acceptable answer.
Awesome. This podcast is brought to you by Martin Kearns and the Valor of Valhalla series. In the battle between two ancient evils, can one naive young man become the last hope against powerful creatures of legend? Beneath the Veil is the gripping first book in the Valor of Valhalla dark urban fantasy series. If you like reluctant heroes, infernal myths, and bloody epic clashes, then you'll love Martin Kearns' formidable foray into the unknown. So head on over to readkearns.com and grab yourself a copy of Beneath the Veil today. Well.
But now we find out who you really are, Anthony, and we get you to start telling us about the two books that you've got currently out on. Well, up from where I got it from Amazon. Why don't you take us into give us a bit of an overview on the books, and also give us an overview on how you got started in writing, and what made you want to be a storyteller and tell the stories that you've written.
So it's actually a bit of a backdoor into the whole writing for me. I suppose like I'd always loved like reading, especially fantasy and then historical fiction from quite a young age. Like growing up with mum reading Harry Potter to me and this and that. But the actual writing started in my third year of uni. I was actually studying graphic design. So I was nearly finished my bachelor's, and we were doing pretty much the final for the year was essentially whatever you wanted, and mine was targeting on book advertising. Anyway, I started having a play, and I just thought a cool bit of advertising with some stuff you could do. You could have like a giant map or something. So I started having a play around on Illustrator one day. Ended up creating this bit of like the start of a map, and from there I was like, you know what, I'll write something like small and just sort of figure it out from there. Anyway, I ended up writing about a 1,500 word piece about a character called Katara, and there's sort of like this fight happens inside of a cage, like a sword fight just between two combatants in a cage, and it sort of grew from there as I was designing the map. I was like, who are these different people? What is this land that I created called Mirror? Who's Katara actually? And it just sort of grew and grew and grew from there. The first full chapter I wrote was about a seafaring, like a navigator called Astrid, and that ended up being the chapter 7 of the first book. And from there, Blood of the Eagle came, essentially.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's where it started. Just a happy accident, for lack of a better expression.
That's awesome.
No, that's very good. So why don't you? So you've obviously you've as I mentioned, you've got the two books out at the moment. You've got Blood of the Eagle and Shadow of the Nightingale, which, as you mentioned off air, Blood of the Eagle's the first book, and then Shadow of Nightingale follows on. So why don't you tell us a bit about Blood of the Eagle? Give us a basic overview of it, and so our listeners can get a good idea of what it's like, and hopefully they can jump on and buy it.
All right. So the series as a whole, it's a very grounded fantasy series. So I've tried to make everything feel as realistic and sort of logical as possible throughout the whole thing, and really tried to give as much depth to the characters. I spent about a year of world building before I actually started writing, like properly writing the story. So I made hundreds of years worth of history for the different cultures, different religions, what they wear, their names, all different stuff like that is very nation-centric. all the different conflicts that have happened throughout that time period, as far back as 500 years, some even further back than that, just to try and give it depth. And then from there, you can just name small events that happened and then build from that later. And why did this group of people sort of hate that group of people and vice versa? But more into Blood of the Eagle. So there's a few sort of key characters that centralizes around. The first one is called Kearle. So he's the son of a tavern keeper who's looking to join a group called the Order of Kilcara, which is like a holy order, a religious order that follows the gods called the Twins. So you've got Durandal, who's like the warrior god of the sun, and Azaria, who is the sort of the lady of the moon and truth and justice. So and they're subsects. So you've got the knights who are following Durandal and the Maya, which follow Azaria. And his whole thing revolves around joining the knights. He's a very religious kid. He's only 18 at the start of the first one. And it's sort of his development through the order, his initiation, the sort of trials he has to go through to become a knight. And it almost sort of follows a Holy Grail-esque kind of quest throughout it. So that's one of the beginnings. Another one is Astrid, who I mentioned just before. So she is a navigator, a part of the Valkyr, from the Valkyr Isles. So they're like seafarers. They're some of the best shipmen in the world, best sailors in the world. And she is like the elite of the elite when it comes to navigating too. She's extremely intelligent. One of the lines I've got in there is that her mind is sharper than any sword. And that's how I've really tried to focus on her. She doesn't really take part in the fighting at all. Not that she has really any aversion to it, but she prefers to outsmart people and beat them with her mind. So her story revolves around her father getting murdered and her tracking down the killer and seeking vengeance for that happening. So you've got this character who takes over her father's like mantle as captain, takes control of this crew, and then essentially is forced to become a traitor throughout the entirety of book one to figure out what's going on. And then the next sort of core story, up to the north, there is a group called the Selvari, there's 12 tribes who live in this great forest. They're all very different. They all wear different things. They all have different tattoos. They speak a little bit differently. Some of them worship different spirits to other ones. Some love using poisons. For example, some live in the highland mountainous areas. And they've all got like different skills. And it starts off with a civil war sort of kicks up amongst them. And one of the chiefs is killed. His brother takes over that mantle, and the third youngest brother gets sent south to try and find allies from a war that had happened 25 years prior, to see if the old alliances are still alive. And he heads down to a country called Honora. However, that country refuses to help as they don't want to cross a lot of political borders and cause issues getting through the north, which they would have to do, and that would start a big chaos. So the youngest prince of Honora, Lucas, he's a very rebellious, almost borderline arrogant prince. He decides to go and help Kylian, the chief's brother. So he joins up with him and his good friend Sakar, and they head north to try and sort of resolve this issue, and in so doing, create quite a few political issues along the way. So those are the main storylines, but the other sort of main character who isn't mentioned is Katara. So her storyline links up a little bit with the Civil War. She's an outcast who is currently with the Mirans, who are sort of the greatest sort of horsemen in the world. The whole region is like a steppe, so more like Mongolia kind of esque. And she's this elite duelist in a nation where the women don't fight. So she learned from somewhere else how to fight. She's very mysterious to begin with. Where did she learn how to fight? She's a survivor. Very hard. Every decision she makes is to survive. So whether that's betraying someone or killing someone, anything like that, is purely to survive.
And is this like this? Obviously, definitely sounds very interesting and right up my alley. So I'm glad I made the purchase. But is it the way that you're telling the story? Is this several different tales told within the book, or is it is something they eventually all meet up and like a typical JRPG role playing game? Do they eventually all meet up and then follow the one goal, or is it just told as these separate people and their separate stories?
So it begins very much with separate people and separate stories. But as the story sort of unfolds, whether or not they meet on the same side or on opposing sides, they might meet up at some point further into the trilogy, but some may not. So it's very dependent on which character it is you are following and where they are at that time as to what happens, essentially, like that. But they are linked. Is probably the best way. They're definitely all linked.
Yep. So have you mapped like the whole thing out, everyone's journeys, or are you kind of writing as you go, or a combination? How's that working?
So I'm actually way ahead of schedule. So I've actually finished the third book, which is called Song of the Raven. Awesome. I've written a prequel set 100 years before called Keeper of the Flame, and that's so 100 years before, there's this massive political event, which was an inquisition into what is currently called Medea, but was then called the Northlands. So it was hundreds of fiefdoms led by barons, and there was this massive civil war / purge occurred after the Inquisition took place. And it sort of follows that storyline and how that affected 100 years later going into the trilogy. And I'm currently working on sequels now. The first one is titled Summer of the Wolf.
I like that. I suppose with the amount of time and effort you went into doing the world building, that also, as you say, gives you an opening to write a prequel or to write, a different story that you may hear a little bit of in the main book. And, you may want to, and you think, what, I can expand on this as another book in itself or another trilogy in itself. I think that's by spending, as you said, you spend a year during the world building, you're only setting yourself up for success, because then you can go, hey, okay, I've written this trilogy. I kind of want to explore this world a little bit more. Or you might get the feedback from the fans, we want to know more about this or this and this. And then you can go, okay, well, yeah, because I've done the world building, I can now write a single book or a whole bunch of short stories based in that world.
Yeah, exactly. And a few points just to add on to that is that when things are mentioned throughout the books, they're mentioned by characters who have opinions. So what they say might not actually be the truth. It's just what they think is the truth. Cool. So I've got so many different aspects, like different opinions on the exact same event, that you don't actually know what's true a lot of the time. You know roughly what happened. You know that maybe this side won and that side lost, but you don't know the details going into it. Who was actually the supposed good guy and who was the bad. But it very much is a grey story like that. Like there's good and evil on both sides. There's good and wrong causes on both sides. Like there's a lot of sub-elements happening in the background of these big events. But one thing just with the world building as well that I really enjoyed was, as I was actually writing, the world sort of grew and established. Not just what I'd done previously. It really just helped build. There's a line in the first book which, without spoiling it, actually became quite an integral plot point for not just the trilogy, but all the future books as well. And it was just a one-off line that I put in there for purely for world building purposes.
And that was about Ryan, the Uber driver.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny you should mention that. One of my good friends who actually made me publish the first book, and he's read way ahead compared to what's published. Wayne, his name is. He's a bookseller. Shout out to Wayne. Yep, he's been probably one of the biggest helps ever in this world to me. I did name a character after him, called Compton, who is a bard, a pretty eclectic bard kind of character who is pretty integral, especially into book number 2. Yeah.
Being a massive rap fan from the 80s, if you've named a gentleman Compton and he's a bard, please tell me he does a rap at least, because I mean, you've just set yourself up, like, you know, Compton being obviously rap fans of all ages will know as one of the integral parts to, you know, groups like NWA, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, all of that. You got to tell me there's a coincidence that you Compton and you've made him a bard. Is that just a coincidence?
I definitely planned that for sure. No, he doesn't rap, but there is a few lyrics and a bit of fun with some of his songs, especially in Nightingale.
Nice. Well, I was going to say you could in the trilogy you could put in. NWA had this famous song called "Fuck the Police." You could always put him sing the song with his little harp or little guitar, saying "Down with the establishment," and you'll get the same effect as NWA's "Fuck the Police." So there's a little. Hey, look, if you throw that in book 3 and I read book 3, I'm going to be like just tipping my cap to you, sir.
I'm putting it on the edit as we speak.
I'm a weird one. I love my punk rock. Like in my lovely friend Jamie bought me a NoFX hat from their last show because I couldn't go because I was in hospital. But I go from loving punk rock, like pop punk rock, to loving 80s rap like NWA, Tupac, Biggie, Snoop Dogg, Dr. all that kind of stuff, because that's what I grew up on in high school. You know, so when they started bringing out these movies like Straight Outta Compton, you know, all that kind of stuff, it just brought it back. And as soon as you said Compton and that he was a bard, I thought, if that's not a coincidence, I'm going to put the mental note into your head that it is now representing, you know, 80s rap of all time.
Now, the real question, Ryan, is do you want that to happen, or do you want Ryan the Uber driver?
Look, I don't look as much as our fans. I don't think we're ready for a Ryan the Uber driver multiverse just yet.
We could do Rian the horse carriage driver.
Oh, okay, there you go. Lock it in. I'm going to have my own Deadpool 3 movie soon with all these variants.
The multiverse of Ryan. Let's get it started.
Can I ask, going back to your story, Anthony, can I ask, are you a fan of Dungeons and Dragons?
I love the lore of it. I've actually read a lot of books based on it, such as Dragonlance. But I actually have never played. I have been wanting to play for years, but I've never actually had the chance to play yet.
Well, just from the way that, like, me and Jamie and two of our other friends, we have a monthly. We do more homebrew stuff, so we don't tend to follow the Dungeons and Dragons rules to the T. We make it more about the story. Because we used to record it for a podcast for about 3 or 4 years. We did that. But like even when we play now, we just use more our dungeon master builds these worlds. Like you were saying, you spent a year building the world of your books. And the way you talk about the different characters and the different areas and everything like that, it just had I just assumed that you would have a D&D player, because the way you're building the world, it just reminds me a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. So if you can build worlds like that without even ever playing D&D, I think you got some real talent. I reckon you'd be an amazing dungeon master, in my opinion.
I might have to give it a crack one day. Hey.
Yeah. Oh, seriously, it's honestly we had to cancel this month because unfortunately I've got a fractured spine as well. I was in way too much pain to do anything. But look, just trying to explain why we didn't do it, and I was devastated. Like I miss it. I love it when we get together and we don't muck around. We spend like 10, 12 hours a session, you know, going in. We have so much fun, and even though we don't record anymore, we all still do the voices and stuff like that. And you know, it's just I don't know. It's just like the ability, and it's the same with writing. Like I've got you. I just downloaded your books to my tablet, so it's all good to go. I'll get cracking on those during the week, and I just love the ability, especially with fantasy, to just take you out of the real world. Just even if it's just for like a day or for reading the book for a couple of hours at a time, just the ability to take you outside that area and just forget about your problems in the real world. I think it's and good storytellers have that ability to take you, you know, to sort of essentially drag you into the world, and you don't have to think about anything else for 3 or 4 hours. You know what I mean?
And I think for me, that's one of the main things. Like fantasy essentially is pure freedom, sort of for lack of a better word. And you get to create this whole like sandbox and just play with it as you sort of go. And if something's not working, you can change it. It's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's one of the funnest things I've been doing. Like I've just actually finished a bunch of world building going into my sequels now, and just doing a
Nice.
lot more in-depth stuff. Like probably 10 years ago, I was pretty hardcore reading books on slash researching the Mongolian Empire.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And being able to touch base a bit of that for world building for my own stuff, as well as like playing a lot with like the Macedonian Empire and Alexander the Great, bits and pieces
Yeah.
like that, and just sort of really getting into that the different time and different cultures, and then building this whole new element for this group called Idrisir, and just building this whole mythos around them and their whole completely different way of life. Like they're purely built around being artisans, like especially stone and steel are their two main sort of resources, and building a whole sort of culture centralized around those two things with a very, very rich history going back a few thousand years. Like they're sort of becoming like the oldest civilization, for lack of a better expression. And just working on that has been a lot of fun. And now I'm just hardcore writing these new characters, as well as returning to a few of the old ones, and it's been quite a fun mix.
Awesome. And when you talked about, building the mythos behind some of these, civilizations and races and empires that you're creating, do you find that comes to you easily? Like, are you able to sit down and go, okay, you know what, I'm going to spend the next 6, 7, 8 hours just plugging away, and you can just find that you can plug it away? Or do you have to be in a particular mood, or do you have to, is there a certain time of day or that you can find that can you just write it and sit down and write anytime, anywhere?
See, it was harder to begin with because I essentially started from nothing, right? Now it's a lot easier that I understand the process better. And I know how originally these cultures have been linked together in previous books. Like Idrisi has been named through all the prior books at some point. And I just get to flesh it out now and tie it to other groups through events, through similar religion, but an older version, like a darker version, I would say. And then why have they been sort of sidelined for so long and no one really talks about them anymore? Okay, well, this is why. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm sort of going into it with Idrisir. But yeah, it's just fun linking the old groups. Like I've had a group called the Dalian Empire, which got fully wiped out 160 years before Blood of the Eagle, but they still get mentions because of some of the big events they caused. Like they essentially caused the modern world for my my own world, I should say.
So I'm just wondering more about the process you go into of the world building. Like, is this like, is it all human? Are there creatures? Are there, like, how in depth do you go with the animals and like everything? Like,
so that's actually quite funny, and it's not really spoilers, I should say, because book 2's out, and a lot of these elements are in book 2, but I won't go into too hardcore detail on them. Predominantly
buy the book.
Predominantly human. Predominantly.
Okay.
I have got stuff thrown around like a few like stories about stuff like sirens, for example.
Cool.
I've got a very unique take on the elves, which is whether or not they exist or not. That depends who you ask, but for most of the world, they don't.
Bigfoot.
And there's another group I've fully created my own creature called the Ruskalan, who are almost like a dark twin to the elves that I've created. So the elves essentially are a lot of hot-headed. They act before they think. So they're warriors. That's their main thing. They were created as warriors, essentially. So the warriors, every single one of them, but they do not use their brains very well. They're very passion-driven, very emotional beings, and that obviously causes a lot of issues for themselves.
Yeah.
And then the Ruskalan are the opposite. So they're not like these great warriors, but they're thinkers. They're extremely intelligent. And just like the elves, they pretty much don't exist.
Yeah.
So I've had fun with that. And things like, I've just created a new thing. I like playing with different animals as well.
Yeah.
So I've just got this thing called an ice tiger, which it's not in Summer of the Wolf, but it is mentioned. And it's like sort of a cross between a bear and a tiger, but like a bit bigger, moves silently through sort of Arctic areas. and is known as like a manhunter kind of thing. So it's a bit of fun. Like a lot of the symbols and the mythos behind it, like supposedly the creator of the Aurian Empire rode a griffin. Their symbol is a griffin, but it was so long ago that who actually knows if that's true or not.
Yeah, it's like
Could have been a guy in a costume.
Exactly.
It's like Jim down the pub going, "Yeah, I caught a fish this big," you know.
Yeah. It's like it's like how like inflated stories get over the years, especially in a time where there's no like photo technology, there's no nothing. It's purely mouth to mouth and the occasional written element, and of course it can get exaggerated very quick and easily.
See, that's a really cool concept. Even just like you've created like a creature, you've created stuff, and you just hint at it because you know that you fleshed it out. You can bring it in anytime you want, but it's just like the throwaway lines that are not so throwaway when you think about it. You know? Yeah,
exactly, and it's all worked well. And I think one thing that definitely worked in my favor is that I was pretty much finished Song of the Raven. I had finished it actually before Blood of the Eagle was officially released to the world. So I was able to go back and add more depth to some scenes as I was going, which for me, I only did it once or twice, but that was very, very helpful. And then I'm doing that. I'm doing my final revision of Song of the Raven before it goes to edit, which will be soon, hopefully. And just being able to sort of play with anything, a little tweak, a few bits and pieces, to get a better understanding of a few characters, whether past or future. It's a bit of fun.
Awesome. And you mentioned that this series is a trilogy, but you also mentioned that you're working on some sequels. Is that right?
Yep. So pretty much. So this trilogy is called An Echo of the Ashes. So that's Blood of the Eagle, Shadow of the Nightingale, and finally Song of the Raven. I wrote a standalone prequel called Keeper of the Flame, set 100 years before. I'm working on a sequel duology, which is called The Oracle's Whisper. So the first book is Summer of the Wolf, and the second book is Winter of the Ghost. And then that's like one core story, and that'll be finalized with a single book, which I've got sort of tentatively planned, but haven't really started anything on it. I just sort of know what will happen. So that's going to be like... Sorry, so it's going to be like a core 7-book series, and there will eventually be some spin-offs after that.
That was my next question. Do you plan on, like, obviously you spent all this time building the world. After you've done those sequels, do you plan on still spending some more time in that world, or do you want to jump into something completely different?
The thing is, it's such an expansive world throughout with hundreds of years of lore. I can jump in wherever, but I really want to do at least 1 or 2 books based on the rise and fall of the Delian Empire, because that was no more than 30 years from its rise to its fall, and it was huge. I want to do that. There's a few like small characters throughout these 7 books, which I'd love to go into more depth of, and show their like backstories or even like future stories afterwards. So there's a few characters I really intend to give a lot more detail to in their own little standalones.
So you got a lot. So basically, a lot coming up. You've got a lot on your
exactly. Awesome. And like I've almost made each book have a theme. Like they're all grounded fantasy books, but Blood of the Eagle is kind of like an adventure, whereas Nightingale is more like a dark political thriller, almost like with a lot of crime elements. Song of the Raven is kind of like a war book, and Keeper of the Flame is in the heart of it is a tragedy.
And is there any particular this may be just me? I am a big like I love my fantasy, so I read into a lot of things that may have nothing behind it. But is there a reason why this first trilogy all has a bird or in its title? Does that tie into anything in the story, or is that just how you wanted to do it?
So I was originally struggling for names for the books. The first book went through name, but I always locked in Shadow of the Nightingale for book 2. Yeah, and I remember actually walking with Mum, so she's big into fantasy as well, and she's like my first reader of all my stuff. Yeah. And I just remember talking to her about it. She mentioned, well, you've got this book, and I know the third book's going to be tied to the Raven, so why don't you tie all the first 3 to birds? And I thought that makes perfect sense, because so the sword on the front of Blood of the Eagle has the eagle hilt, right? And that is the symbol of the Raynor family. So Lucas Raynor is one of the main characters. So Blood of the Eagle, his father is known as the eagle. Their whole family symbol is an eagle, and it just sort of tied in from that. So that's about him. Shadow of the Nightingale is about there's this almost folklore-based vigilante called the Nightingale, who runs around in the second book, and then the third one, the Raven, is the symbol of another family, the Farron family, which is like Astrid and her brother and her father.
Awesome. Well, what we might do now is we might. I have one more question, book related, and then we'll jump in talking about your gaming and we're like have a 7.5 hour chat about that. What my last question? I do like to ask this question of all the authors we speak to. Who are your main influences in terms of writers? Obviously, if you're a writer yourself, 99% of the time is you're an avid reader as well. So who are some of the authors that have influenced you over time in your writing?
So probably my favorite one. So you'd be looking at Joel Shepherd, who is an Australian author he did it's probably my favorite fantasy series of all time. It's a very bloody, very gritted, political driven fantasy quartet called A Trial of Blood and Steel. That's my favorite series. I think that was probably my biggest inspiration, just the tone, the setting, that kind of thing. I absolutely love Simon Scarrow's historical fiction, Connor Golden's historical fiction. I love Matthew Riley's works, especially the Scarecrow series. Obviously, if you write fantasy, you've got to throw Tolkien in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of everything, but I've always been more interested in whatever subgenre it is, as long as it feels real, kind of thing. If it feels real, it doesn't matter how fantasy it is or how fictitious it is, as long as to me it feels logical and real, then I can sort of get hardcore into it.
Yeah.
Have you ever read or heard of an author named David Eddings?
I've heard of him, but I've never read him, I don't believe.
I was having this chat with our last guest because it's very rare that I find someone that is actually really into him.
Yep.
My grandmother, again, this is like tied family. She loved fantasy, and she had all of his books and got me into him. If you like that kind of stuff, it is like, while it is fantasy, it does. You can still feel the real elements. He does a series called The Belgariad, which is about 6 books.
Yep.
Ever looking for something to read or bored? Check it out, because I think based on what you're telling us, it'd be right up your alley.
All right, I'll definitely have to look into it then. Definitely.
Even if you have a look and read the synopsis, and if you think, hey, this is not for me, no. I have read. It's like I have certain books that I will read at least once every year, once every 18 months, and the Belgariad series falls into that. I own it physically, I own it digitally, I own the audio books. That's a big tell that I actually really love those books.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd seen as that it sounds like it's probably right up your alley, and I try and promote it to everyone that I possibly can, because I want them to write more.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, I'll definitely give it a crack. Like, before I started being like so much of a writer, I was reading A Trial of Blood and Steel almost every year. I was watching Spartacus almost every year, at least once. But yeah, writing's sort of taking up a big chunk of the time, but I do try and read in that whenever I can outside of that. So just keep things ticking over.
Awesome.
Well, just quickly before we go into games, I had a thought, because I'm comparing him to our good friend Chris, who creates our worlds. But so when you have like a side character in your book, like maybe just someone that a character runs into, do you build them a whole story, like backstory, family life or something? Or
to a degree, every single character comes in for a reason.
Yeah.
If there's something I absolutely hate, it is filler.
Yeah.
So everything has a purpose.
That's awesome.
Whether or not, like, every single character will impact something. That's tried sort of at some point, and that's how I've tried to do it. Whether or not they have a whole big backstory is another story, but
so just enough to make a difference, or
enough to make a difference. They might be in there for character development, to develop different characters. Yeah. There could be a whole plethora of reasons they're there, but I've always tried to give them a purpose, whether or not that's for themselves or for a different character.
That's cool. It's like Chris.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
right, so you mentioned I can't remember if you mentioned it on air or off air, but you mentioned that you're into esports. You're an
Yes.
esports competitor.
Yes.
So tell us about that. How did you get into that? Like what kind of competitions have you been a part of? All that kind of stuff.
So it's actually quite funny. So I'd always, from relatively young age, been a bit of a gamer, mainly thanks to my older brother. So obviously started with stuff like Pokemon on the old Game Boy handhelds and stuff like that. And then our first computer game was the original Age of Empires, which we got from the cereal packet back in the day.
Fine.
So
Mate,
that sort of developed
that
a
had
love.
some of the best graphics and sound effects of its time.
Oh,
of
absolutely.
when you're harpooning a crocodile in the middle of the
Yeah.
mate.
That and then Age of Mythology. But my brother started getting really into first-person shooter games, especially Call of Duty. And because we only had the one computer at the time, I sort of followed a little bit of what he was doing. But FPS wasn't too much my thing. I sort of stopped around Call of Duty 4, the original Modern Warfare, and World at War. I used to love playing the zombie game mode on that. And then it progressed back into my love of strategy games, like went more hardcore into Total War. I actually, for a while, I almost got to competing in Shogun 2 Total War. That was so much fun. I used to have like 12-hour sessions just playing multiplayer on that, and it was just fantastic. That and I love story-driven games like Assassin's Creed. Hardcore Assassin's Creed fan. Going through from the first title through to Syndicate, especially.
What about Black Flag? You can't go past
Oh, you
Black
can't
Flag.
go wrong. No, every single one in order. I 100% completed Brotherhood about 4 times.
Wow.
So to the point where I was helping my old housemate go through it, and I was just remembering the ways to get 100%, and I was just telling him off by heart how to do it.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. So I was played a little bit League of Legends, pretty hardcore for about a year. Stopped because of school. Then I got Then I got into the hardcore Total War days. Played a few bits and pieces like Titan Quest based on the mythology element. Hadn't touched a first-person shooter in about 10 years. I actually stopped gaming for about 6 or 7 months, and then right at the end of 2020, I was just flicking through Twitch one day, and I made a friend with a PUBG competitor from North America, and she sort of introduced me to PUBG, and I met some really cool people on the first day playing, and then that's sort of been my main thing since, to be honest, and a couple of bits forays into like Minecraft and bits and pieces, but Helldivers is probably the most recent one, but PUBG is for me where it's at. It's more like I've got a lot of good friends in it, and just having a lot of fun competing. Like, I used to compete in hockey, for like field hockey overseas, and then a few bits and pieces happened, and I ended up sort of moving into more esports, and it's just been fun grinding away on that and having a few laughs and seeing how we go. Like, I've recently competed in Tier 1 Southeast Asia. It was Oceanic, and then I got made to Southeast Asia, so I competed in that for a bit. I've done some admin work for some of the biggest Asia Pacific tournaments this year.
Awesome.
And it's been a lot of fun just interacting with the different players and helping to try and streamline things on the back end at the same time as playing on stream as well.
Yeah, I think I find, as I said, I had a mate who got really into PUBG. He started off just playing and just watching a lot of the guys on Twitch, and then eventually was good enough to set his own Twitch channel up. And I think it's very interesting to watch. I used to love watching him at his house, and then now obviously on TV and through the Twitch channel. I think it's very, very, very interesting to watch. I like it. I used to be a fan. I'm like you. We used to be a massive fan of the first person shooters growing up. Like I was more. I did all the Call of Duties, but I was more into your Dooms and your sort of those kind of games because of the story. Whereas Call of Duty, like one of my favorite. Well, I have to say my favorite Call of Duty was the first Black Ops. That was what really got me into Call of Duty, and then I went back, and then Modern Warfare was amazing. And then I really fell in love with Ghosts, and it just I can go back and forth. And the good thing about having PlayStation, a lot of them are included in the PlayStation Plus because of rights being owned and everything, so you don't have to pay for it, which is great. But aside from those kind of things, if you want to just put on a game, not have to worry about playing against anyone, just to have a couple of hours to yourself and you just want to unwind, what would be your go-to game?
The unwind game. Just to kick back, just chill.
You don't want to compete or anything. You just come home from work or come home. You've just written for 8 hours, and I just want to, I just want to play a game for hours and just relax.
If it's just me,
yeah.
Honestly, I'd probably just put on a PUBG TDM or something like that. Just have a bit of a bounce around there, but yeah, honestly, it depends what my mood's at. Like, I'll have sessions where I'm grinding Minecraft for weeks and just building stuff. We usually set up realms. Like, a group of us got hardcore into Pal World for a bit. We got hardcore into Muck for a bit. And it just sort of bounces around quite a few different games. But yeah, just me. Well, I don't know. It could even be Skull and Bones recently. I enjoyed playing around that. I streamed that for about 6-7 hours the other day. So it's honestly, it's pretty eclectic. It depends where my mindset is, honestly. But with PUBG, like if I get one or two mates who are online, I'll just jump straight in and we'll just have a few laughs and roll around in the oceanic lobbies and have a bit of fun together.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like when you've got a couple of mates involved, it's not so much what the game is; it's more of the social event.
Yeah.
We live I'm so happy we live in a world where technology allows us to be friends with people in thousands and thousands of miles away. In say for the United States or in places like England or all that. We have the technology now to do that, to jump on and go, hey, you can have a chat, have a catch up, and have a few games as well, which I think is a big thing. Imagine, like I was saying to the guys, imagine if COVID happened, but 20 years before it actually happened. But we had no streaming, we had really no internet, we barely had phones. Imagine, I think a lot more people would have gone crazy than what we did.
Would have been shambles, probably.
Well,
at least I know we were locked down for almost a year, but we would still jump on Zoom every couple of weeks and have a catch up, or you can still do that, and that's the amazing thing about the technology. So I spent out of the last year, I spent about 6 months in hospital, and I'd be lost. I've got a gaming laptop here which I use. I don't do. I'm no offense to online stuff. I don't play. I'm not an online gamer. I'm more of a single player. I switched from JRPGs to horror. I love my Resident Evil games, which I play multiple times a year. And then my JRPGs, like anything from Dragon's Quest, Final Fantasy, you name it. But the fact that I was stuck in a hospital bed with nothing to do in a public hospital in Australia, I had my wife, or my housemate, who used to be my wife, brought up my laptop, and I got my gamepad controller and headphones, and I was able to pretend I wasn't in hospital for 6 or 7 hours a day.
That's one of the best things for it. It's like it's like reading or fiction, especially. It's just like an escape kind of thing. Like as you said, like getting to talk to people who are in other countries outside the world. Like the friend who got me into PUBG, Hella, her name is. It's a IGN. Amazing person. I met so many people through her. One of my best friends from North America. He's called Kingdom. Absolutely amazing guy. He's pretty avid reader, so I always try and send him my signed books.
Nice.
He's really a lot of fun. One of my teammates, Innate, he's from North America as well. So it's been a lot of fun bouncing, and like even just people from Melbourne that I've got to meet. Like I just thought when I got into PUBG, it'd just be a bit of a kickback. Next minute, I'm going to weddings and birthdays and baby showers and this and that, and it's as honestly been like your gaming friends just become your like IRL friends. Like it's really cool.
100%. I see stories on Facebook and Instagram all the time of people who have been gaming together for years and years and finally meeting up in public and having that bond is still there. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, white, black, gay, whatever. You have that bond through gaming, and you get to meet up and that's what I mean. Like. It's a little bit different, but through this podcast, I've made a really great friend who helped me a lot while I was going through the stuff when I lost my leg. And he's actually one of our sponsors for the show, Martin Kearns, who we just had him on as an author. I bought his book. He's another fantasy writer. Absolutely loved his book, added him on Facebook, and we talk almost every day. And, he's over in America. and I'm over here, and the fact that we could whenever I was feeling down, I could just reach out and we could have a chat. And so I'm a bit of a night owl. With my pain, I don't generally sleep through the night, so I'm up gaming, whatever. Like I've got a great setup here. Steph has got me a really great setup so that I can just play. I've got PS5 with my Sony TV, and I can just put my Sony headphones on and just forget about everything. It doesn't matter if I go to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
Oh, geez, the late nights. I'll never forget. I remember I was playing with a couple with one of my good friends a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, just playing just some casual PUBG games, and we were about to go to bed at 12:30. Next minute, we hear two of our friends jump into Discord and say, "Hey, do you want to play ranked?" So we end up. So bear in mind, I'd work the next day, and where I was working at that time, it was about an hour drive, and it was full-time work, so it's about a 10-hour day all around, and we were up until about 4:30.
But there's some of the that's the thing about having knowing people in different countries. They're just coming online. And that's the same thing with Martin. I might be up at 1 o'clock in the morning still playing, and then I'll see him come online and we'll have a chat, and he's like, "Shouldn't you be asleep?" And I'm like, "Yeah, can't too much." But that's what I love about that kind of stuff. And I'm 42, so I'm very stubborn and will not get into online gaming, and I feel like I'm missing it. But I'm not one. I'm a great gamer. I'm a great single player gamer. Not to toot my own horn, but I suck at multiplayer.
Me too.
When other people rely on me is where I fail. I can playing single player. It's only me that I'm letting down if I die for some stupid reason. If I have like a stinging pain down my leg and I accidentally shoot a civilian, you know what I mean? Like I'm only letting myself down, but I just can't I can't handle the pressure of being multiplayer. But I hear some of the most amazing stories, online of friendships that have, garnered over 40 years of just by gaming, you know what I mean? And that's, people, I remember back in the day when people used to say, "Oh, gaming is what caused, the Columbine massacre and all this kind of stuff." I can't see it. Like I've played horror games my whole life since I was 12. I've played horror games and Call of Duty games. And yes, I did that level on Modern Warfare where you actually had to be the terrorists and kill civilians and stuff. I've never wanted to kill anyone. I've never wanted I've never wanted to go out and do anything bad. And I hate it when people say that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No, I completely agree with that. And it's just, again, it's just such a good way to like meet people and enjoy. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. No, well, that was really appreciate you talking about that kind of stuff about game. I know we don't very rarely have gamers on, and the last two visits we've had, the last two interviews we've had have been avid gamers, so it's been really cool to talk about that kind of stuff. But before we let you go, why don't you plug away? Where I know obviously I've mentioned you can pick up your books if you're in Australia, and I'm assuming overseas, you can pick up your books on Amazon. I noticed the first book you can get as a Kindle or a paperback.
Yep, correct.
Second, for some reason it just said Kindle. Is that correct?
No, you can definitely get that paperback too. So you because it is globally distributed, you could pick that up from your local bookshop. They might not have it in stock, but they can order it in for you. Awesome. You can get it online through the Shoreline Publishing website, or I do a lot of sales too, so I'm just a message away at the end of the day too. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram predominantly. So those would be the best sort of places.
On Instagram and Facebook?
So on Instagram, it's Anthony.Kearle. I believe it's something similar on Facebook too.
But yeah, so people want to say get a signed copy of your book, they can just reach out to you directly.
Reach out to me. I can do my own sales. I've tried and float around through markets through Victoria. We've got one hopefully happening at the Melbourne market this month, I should say. Now, actually, later this month, me and another author from my town called Jade Andrews, who does like romantasy fiction. So we'll be heading down together to Melbourne and trying to get something going. But been to like Clunes a few years and a few others. So
that's an interesting combo.
Yeah, wow, it works. Surprisingly, almost.
Have you thought about doing like purely romantic fantasy, that sort of?
Look, I'll put romance in it, but I won't make a whole story around it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's what I had to do with my zombie trilogy. Because it's about the zombie apocalypse breaking out at a Bucks party.
Oh,
You know,
all
so
right,
it's called Bucks Night. So Knights with a K.
Yeah,
And
nice.
everyone's dressed medieval.
I like that.
And then there's Hen's Night, and they've all got a K. And then like the third one's like in a few years in the future, and it's called Wedding Night, and they're trying to get married, but they got to find a priest and
I like that.
comical stuff. But
That's a good concept, I reckon.
Yeah, but
And did you want to give a bit of background of some of the main characters in that story, Jamie?
or just the one, or
Your choice.
No, well, look, they're all based on. They're all named after real people, but there's like personality traits that are different. Like, I'd say, look, it was because the Bucks party that I actually threw a medieval themed Bucks party.
Okay.
For my friend Chris, but I kind of inadvertently switched our personalities, so I was in it and he was in it, but I swapped our personalities, kind of, because it made more sense that Chris would have the money and finance to throw an actual, medieval themed Bucks party. But yes, they're all based on sort of, at least the first book's based on real people on the Bucks side. But
that would be fantastic.
Yeah, but yes. So if guys out there, head on over to jabryden.com and grab yourself an ebook copy. I've only done ebooks, and I intend to do basically because they're novellas. So when they're finished, I'll kind of put them in one book together.
I get you.
It just makes more sense to me.
I'd agree. Getting it all sorted and figuring it out that way.
Yeah.
Gotta start somewhere, right?
That's it. Anyway, guys, thanks. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Anthony, for coming on. It's been a great chat.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really good.
And guys, if you want to reach out, thetrueandthefictional@gmail.com. Check us out on Instagram, stories_podcasts, or on Facebook and all that stuff. And feel free to reach out if you want to come on for a chat. You can be an author, you can be a filmmaker, you can be a comic book writer. You can be anything, really. We'll probably talk to anyone, to be honest. But thank you, guys, and we'll catch you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.